Welcome to our webinar delivered by Avec Partnership and EPM. I'm Alex Hawkins, Director of HR Services at EPM, and during this webinar we will provide you with helpful guidance to support you with preparing for your return to the new academic year. We will be discussing the key considerations when it comes to reintegrating employees back into your school, how to manage reluctant employees, and how you can take a proactive approach to encourage employees to take responsibility for their own return. You're likely to encounter some challenging people issues along the way, so our HR experts have provided some practical guidance that you can action to ensure you are ready for this autumn term.
Hello everybody, my name's Elaine Hammond. I'm Assistant Director in the HR team at EPM.
And I'm Eve Springbett, also an Assistant Director in the HR team. So we're going to begin by talking about reintegration into the workplace for your employees. And this has certainly been a key aspect of our work over the last few weeks and will be well into the new academic year as well. It presents us with a number of challenges, some difficulties that we've faced before and some around topics that we may not have seen before. And we'll be discussing that as we move through the presentation.
Yeah, okay, so pausing of shielding finished on the 1st of August 2020, quite a key date there. That is, unless the individual's in a local lockdown or there is individuals have been notified otherwise by the NHS and have received official notification that you could ask to see should they indicate that they fall into that category.
We have seen some of those, haven't we, Elaine, across the schools that we support. Not too many, but we've seen a few, and the schools have requested, confirmation of that situation. So don't be afraid to do that.
Yeah, okay, so many vulnerable employees have already returned in some capacity, and many more will obviously be returning in September, subject to what we've just spoken about. This includes the clinically vulnerable. Some people will still start to ask about home working. The government has said home working should continue where possible, but clearly, as with any flexible working request, you do need to be thinking about the impact that may have on your organisation delivery, teaching and learning, impact on colleagues. So don't be afraid to actually assess it as a standard flexible working request and look at those legitimate reasons for declining it should it have a negative impact. But please do, some schools have looked at it very creatively, and we've seen more individual roles or groups of employees being able to work from home very successfully.
In terms of your risk assessments, so we need to be thinking about individual risk assessments being undertaken, but also the school-wide generic risk assessment for reopening. And I'm sure many of you have looked at these documents already and have a number of them in place for your particular individuals. However, it's really important to remember that they are live documents, so you need to keep them under constant review, as you would with any risk assessment, and make sure that you're discussing them with employees, particularly where you might have an employee who's concerned about their return, for example, and make sure that you're keeping those up to date.
And one of the things I would say in terms of the risk assessment is not the document itself, it's actually the implementation of the risk assessment. And some of the challenges that we've received from trade union representatives or individuals who are concerned about their return to work or how it's happening in the workplace are about them not being implemented in the way that it says in the risk assessment. So we have heard, for example, where bubbles have actually all joined together in a staff room, and that has concerned members of staff, and where leaders in some instances have seen those bubbles joining together and actually haven't been seen to be actually reminding staff about the appropriateness of the risk assessment and making sure that that is adhered to. Okay, so we now want to talk to you about how to support those employees who are actually reluctant about returning to the workplace. And I'm sure a number of you will be aware that there are some people who have got those concerns. So this next point will show the importance of how you implement a risk assessment, how you support that employee who's concerned about a return to workplace. We have seen reluctance across the board over the last few months, but what has really worked well is discussing those concerns, really understanding what those concerns are. A lot of the time it can be miscommunication or an employee not fully understanding or an informal walk around the building to see the changes that have been taken place. have really resolved a load of concerns, and we've actually seen some really successful returns to the workplace.
And I think for a lot of people, when you've been out of the workplace for so long and probably shielding at home, so in fact out of society really for such a long time, those concerns can really mount in someone's head. And when they actually get into school or have a discussion and see what changes have been made and how safe they could feel coming into work, it really makes a difference. So it's really important that we try and address these things sort of informally by communication, good discussion, before we move down any other procedures to try and manage reluctant returnees to school.
Absolutely, yeah. By completing that risk assessment, sharing it with the employees, adapting it in line with anything that you've agreed with the employee to show that you've listened and you've taken on board their concerns is really, really important. So where the employee's been concerned about returning to work, do make sure that you do the individual risk assessment if that's appropriate. Pull out the concerns. They should enable you as the employer to have a discussion about what the support and adjustments can be made where appropriate for that individual, or indeed for a group of employees or the whole workforce if they've got some pertinent points there.
And think about who's having those discussions as well. So who is completing the risk assessment with the employee and who's having those discussions, and is that the right person within school to be doing that? It's really important that the right sort of level, if you like, the right person within the school is having those conversations, particularly if it's going to be a difficult discussion.
And in a limited number of cases, employees are very, very concerned, and occupational health have been involved. They've reviewed the individual risk assessment. They may have met with the employee, given some advice and guidance to you as an employer to think about reasonable adjustments as well. There's been very few formal complaints under the whistleblowing procedure from employees, and they may put them under the whistleblowing heading, but it's really important for you to fully consider whether it really is a whistleblowing or actually it might be a grievance that they're raising. So there's a few of those, so do look out for those and identify whether they are a whistleblowing or a grievance, if indeed either of them.
We have seen very few of those up to this point, but the reason we're mentioning it is that is the way that an employee would raise the concerns if they really didn't feel like you were dealing with them in the appropriate way. And as it says on the slide, they could also involve the health and safety executive as well at any point through those discussions or those procedures. So it's worth being aware of that, but we have seen that it's very often it's very easy to avoid those procedures by good communication and having discussions with the employee where necessary. And of course, if they do ultimately refuse to return to work and you've done everything that you can and they're still not happy to return, then it may result in unpaid leave or potentially a disciplinary action if it's not being dealt with under your sickness absence procedure. So there's a number of policies or procedures that could be at play here when we're dealing with people not returning to work. So that could be your sickness absence procedure, as we've mentioned, your special leave of absence procedure, whether that be authorised or unauthorised leave, paid or unpaid, or ultimately your disciplinary policy as well. And we'll talk about managing some of those policies in the next slide, but it's important that those are up to date and you know where those policies are, which policies you've adopted within the school or the trust, and you're ready to implement them should you need to.
Okay, we've just been talking to you about how you as managers can help support employees in terms of their absence and managing that absence, and also supporting them with their concerns over returning to the workplace in the up and coming autumn term. We'd now like to flip that from that reactive approach to a more proactive approach, and how the employees have a part to play in a successful return to work. So we've come up with a guidance document that you can provide to your employees so that they can think about the sorts of things they should do having been off work for a period of time. So, for example, they need to be engaging with individuals, making sure they're familiar with the necessary changes that have been made, how they can keep themselves and others safe. There's two versions of the document that we've produced that you can provide to employees. One is a generic version, and another is a customised version where you can actually add the support and changes that you've made in a particular school or as a trust.
And when we talk about well-being, it is always really important that we make sure that we look at the employer's responsibilities and the employee's responsibilities. So as Elaine says, this just encourages employees to take some responsibility themselves. even if that just be raising concerns with you when they have them, if they feel something in the school isn't working as it should or isn't keeping people safe as it should, that they are raising that in the appropriate way, and that you're dealing with that once they've done so. So it is a really useful document, just reminding the employees what they need to do. So that's available. The action checklist points you to where you can access that if you want to. It's also important that we just have a quick think about occupational health and employee assistance programs as well. So of course you may be referring employees to occupational health where that's necessary to receive some advice about returning to work and supporting them, and also using an employee assistance program if that's relevant. And if you don't have that in place, or if you'd like some more information about occupational health or employee assistance programs, please do get in touch with us. We can put you in touch with Medigold Health, who are able to help with that as well.
Okay, so that brings us to the end really, where we're talking about supporting employees back into the school environment. And I'm sure you're actually very familiar with the fact that it's really important that we get everyone into the mindset about a return to work and support them for a successful return, noting that schools are opening up wider to more and more children, and therefore you need more staff back in the workplace. Up till now, we are very aware that some employers have encourage staff to return, but there have been some people have actually staffed their schools for the smaller number of staff, students on site via volunteers. That's not going to be possible in the majority of the situation. So we hope that we've given you some food for thought on how you can actually encourage the majority, if not all of your staff, to be in the workplace and to feel safe and looked after, as you'd expect any employer with their duty of care towards employees.
And as we always say, if you have any specific queries or concerns, or any specific cases that you'd like to talk through, please don't hesitate to contact your HR contact in the office. We'd be more than happy to support you with that and to discuss the different ways that you might manage some of these more tricky circumstances that we actually haven't seen before. Thank you for listening to this webinar, and I hope you take away some useful tips to help you with reintegrating your employees back into the workplace and how to deal with some challenging people issues that you may face during this term. Don't forget to download our action checklist, which allows you to easily identify the actions and key priorities that you should consider at the start of the autumn term. We cover all aspects ranging from HR, wellbeing, safer recruitment, payroll, finance, governance, strategic planning and health and safety, so you'll be fully prepared for the new academic year. Also, don't forget to join us on 23rd of September from 2 till 3 p.m. for our live question and answer session. Join our panel of experts as we discuss your key concerns in regards to HR, wellbeing, safer recruitment, payroll, governance and health and safety. You can register for our session and submit your questions in advance or ask them live on the day. Finally, if you need any further support, please don't hesitate to get in touch with the Avec and EPM team, and we'll be happy to support you further. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to hearing from you.